Jyoti, a pleasure truly to have you here.
Great to be here.
So there are many things you have done, but the one thing that people pick on is then how can one person create one unicorn, come back and build two more companies. One is already unicorn, the other one is getting there to be unicorn. So it becomes a very sexy thing to look at, but there's a lot of effort. So my first question, which is, what does it take to build a unicorn and almost 3 times over?
Well, I would say startups are hard and building unicorns are hard. So if the main thing is, like, if you really care about the problem you want to solve and you're willing to commit long time and energy and focus on solving that problem, it's fulfilling. And that's what I do it. Like, that's what it takes. Like, you have to commit to the problem. You have to commit to excelling and solving that problem the best. And that's the path to becoming a unicorn.
It all starts, like you said, finding a problem and trying to solve it genuinely. But it's a lot more than that. So when you're building a startup, and before you even think of a unicorn, the nuts and bolts of that have to come together. The passion is only so much. There is consistent hard work. So if I were to ask you, because people would like to emulate your success, is 1, 2, 3 things that an entrepreneur has to keep his eyes and focus on that. How would you empower the ecosystem?
Well, I would say the number one thing as an entrepreneur, you have to learn how to persevere through hard times. Because when you go through a startup, you will have, like, few months are going well, and then you suddenly run into some problem or some problems that you didn't anticipate, with competitors, with product, with people, with all sort of things, investors. And you have to find ways to persevere through it and not get mentally too blocked on it, and then, because that's where a lot of the founders will fail. So that's my one advice. Second thing I tell people is, like, you got to master how do you sell your products. Because a lot of times when entrepreneurs start, they know the products, they know how to build products, but they don't know how to sell it. So the revenue becomes a challenge, and if you can't deliver revenue for your business, you struggle. So my advice to every entrepreneur is never lose your eye from the revenue, because that is the lifeblood of your business. The third thing I would advise every founder is, ultimately what matters is that you're solving the problem for whoever your customers are in the best possible way. So a lot of times when we start companies as founders and entrepreneurs, there's too many noise about things, so many things going on, and you start losing the focus. Like, what's the North Star? And my advice to every founder is, like, keep the North Star, that you have to solve the problem that you started with. And that problem that the world cares about solving, you want to solve it best for your customers. As long as you don't lose focus on the North Star, all the noise around it will all be manageable. So those are my top 3 advice.
Great advice. But one of the things that people don't get it is, they think revenue will come as long as you build traction. I think that's a misnomer. I think I'm glad it's kind of waning down now. The other part is that, every entrepreneur you talk to wants to raise money. You cannot just raise money on your whims and fancies and thoughts. It has to be. So is raising money that easy? Then everybody would have done that. So again, a bit of advice on raising money.
Sure. I would say to raise money, my advice to an entrepreneur is that the VCs, when they're putting money into a company, they're looking for 3 things. One is you have to prove that this is a large market. That if the company succeeds, which most companies don't succeed, that if they succeed, this is going to be big. Because that's how the business model of VC work. Like, the companies that succeed are very big, and most of them didn't win. The second thing you have to prove is that there is external traction, validation of the how you're solving the problem. And many times it could be, like, that you have customer interviews. Sometimes it could be revenue. Sometimes it could be, free users are using it. But you have to create validation. And VCs will say, show me traction. That's really validation. The third is you have to sell yourself. You have to sell yourself in the way, like, you have to convince the VCs that you are the best person, or your team, your founding team is the best person to solve this problem. Because anytime there's a good idea, you would never be the only startup to solve it. There will be, like, 10, 15, 20 other startups trying to solve the same problem. So you have to convince the VCs why you would win. And as long as you do those 3 things, you can find a way to raise capital.
Most people who start startups are innovators, or they have worked for a bigger company for 15, 20 years. They got an idea, they see a gap, they do it. But most of these innovators are not good entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurs is a very different ball game. You have to have your eyes on the customer and the money, like you said. So just being an innovator is not enough. So how do we make them understand that entrepreneurship is very different? If an innovator, bring a co-founder with you who can bring the other traits with it.
Well, sometimes, yes, you bring co-founder as the other trait. Sometimes you learn to have the other traits. So I tell people like innovators are the core of how do you start a company. If you don't have innovators, you can't have a business. But can innovators learn the other business skills? People can. I was an engineer when I started my first company. I had no business experience. I didn't have any co-founders also. I had to go through that learning as well. And I would say you have to learn how to operate the business, and it comes down to learning sales. And if you put time and focus and energy into appreciating selling and figuring out how do you find customers, that would be needed. Second part is needed is the people. Like how do you get people on board? How do you inspire them? How do you recruit them? How do you make them part of your journey? So to become an entrepreneur, successful entrepreneur, you have to either commit to learning these skills or have a co-founder who would have these skills already. But either paths are possible.
In terms of evolution of a leader, it's very essential that when you start with 2 people, then 20 people, 200 and 2,000. Obviously, you have to evolve. You may or may not be the right person. You may evolve, may not evolve to be CEO. But now that you have done almost 3 at a very large scale, how does the leadership tactics change in terms of your thinking, the approach, and reacting to the teams on the market?
Yeah, leadership is all about getting the right people and empowering them. That to me is the number one thing that I've learned, which is if you that you don't want to micromanage and be the person who thinks can do it all. You want to bring people, and many times people who are much better than you in many of those jobs, and you have to empower them. And then you have to align them that they're all going into the same direction. So when I think of leadership and as how I've gone from in multiple companies, to me it's like my job as a CEO, as a leader, is to create a very clear vision and about what we are doing. Then we need to get people on board to execute on that. Third is we need to create alignment, which is that people are aligned towards their all plans and strategies are all aligned. And then fourth, finally, is you have to create an operational rigor, where a discipline around results and outcomes and accountability. And if you do these 4, you can manage the organizations well, and that's how I look at it. When you are in a 20% company, it's a little bit different than when you're 200 and when you're 2,000. But ultimately, the framework remains the same.
My last question, Jyoti, is about exiting. While you're building, people have the exit in mind. And everybody obviously have those dreams of taking it to unicorn status, taking it to IPO, but that's not always the case. You're always ready to exit at all different stages. Some lessons learned in terms of advising entrepreneurs, then how you should be ready to exit at different stages.
Well, my advice is pretty simple. Don't plan for an exit. Plan for building a great business. And great business is that you have great product. You are doing execution of the business well. You have happy customers. And if you are focusing on that, exit opportunities will happen. People will seek out to you for exit opportunities. If you focus about building a business for exit, you're going to build a wrong business. And I advise every entrepreneur, that's not how you should be building for. You should not be building for, if I build this thing, maybe I can sell it to someone else. You have to build it for that I'm building a great product that people will care about, and I'm going to make my business successful, and that's when you get the exits coming to you.
All great lessons from one of the very finest, one of the best. I know the third one is also going to be unicorn. Again, such a pleasure, Jyoti. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me here.